On August 12, 1762, in St. James's Palace, London, George IV was born to King George III and Queen Charlotte. George IV, originally named George Augustus Frederick, grew up in a royal environment, receiving an education befitting a future king. The young prince displayed artistic talent, taking an interest in painting and architecture, influenced by the cultural movements of his time. As he matured, George IV developed a keen interest in politics, becoming an influential figure in Parliament. In 1785, George IV married Caroline of Brunswick, a union arranged for political reasons, which turned out to be tumultuous. George IV took the throne in 1820 after the death of his father, King George III, during a period marked by social and political upheaval. His reign was marked by the luxurious lifestyle he pursued, leading to his nickname Prinny, becoming a symbol of extravagance. Despite his excesses, George IV was a patron of the arts, supporting notable artists and architects, enhancing Britain's cultural landscape. George IV is remembered for commissioning the iconic Brighton Pavilion, a symbol of his artistic vision and royal indulgence. His reign also saw important events, including the Peterloo Massacre, which highlighted the growing demand for political reform. George IV's opposition to reform movements marked his reign, leading to criticisms of his leadership skilled in luxury rather than governance. The king's relationship with his wife, Caroline, deteriorated, causing national scandal during his reign, leading to a controversial trial. Despite their separation, George IV continued to manifest affection for his daughter, Princess Charlotte, spoiling her with attention and gifts. He faced numerous public protests regarding his extravagant lifestyle amid a struggling nation, highlighting the disconnect with the common people. The king's later years were plagued by isolation, marked by his deteriorating health and the increasing influence of his advisors. George IV's death on June 26, 1830, marked the end of an era, leading to his brother William IV's ascension to the throne. His legacy includes being a symbol of the extravagant lifestyles of the monarchy, influencing royal perception in British history. As George IV grew older, his artistic talents flourished, leading him to support various cultural movements in England, showcasing his patronage at places like the Royal Academy of Arts. In 1785, George IV's marriage to Caroline of Brunswick was arranged not for love, but for political necessity, reflecting the intricate relationships of European royal families. George IV's relationship with Caroline quickly soured, marked by public scandal and personal discord. Their estrangement led to significant public interest and criticism. Despite his troubled marriage, George IV lavishly indulged in life, becoming a symbol of luxury and excess that caused public protest during hard economic times. As the new king, George IV faced the challenges of a nation longing for reform, overseeing events like the Peterloo Massacre that showcased public discontent. Known for his extravagant patronage, George IV commissioned the Brighton Pavilion, a remarkable architectural statement reflecting his taste for the exotic. Public perception of George IV was marred by accusations of being out of touch as he continued to lead a life of opulence amidst a struggling populace. As George IV's reign continued, he struggled with personal health issues, leading to further isolation and reliance on his advisors for governance. George IV demonstrated a soft spot for his daughter, Princess Charlotte, whom he spoiled with gifts and attention, highlighting his complex parental relationships. With his health declining, George IV often withdrew from public life, relying heavily on his advisors to make decisions, which led to further criticism. Despite his flaws, George IV brought attention to arts and culture, influencing the artistic landscape of Britain during his reign, paving the way for future patronage. George IV's legacy is also marked by his resistance to reform, which laid the groundwork for future political struggles and increased demands for change in Britain. In his final years, George IV faced reality alone, marked by solitude and royal expectations that characterized the weight of the crown he wore. Following his death on June 26, 1830, George IV's reign left a controversial legacy that influenced perceptions of monarchy and governance in the 19th century. George IV's life story became a subject of discussion among historians, reflecting the intricacies of royal duties, personal life, and the effect on the monarchy's public image. Many of George IV's infrastructural and cultural projects laid foundations that would inspire future generations of royals and politicians in Britain and beyond. Despite the controversies, George IV's love for architecture and art led to the creation of iconic structures that continue to define British heritage. The complexities of George IV's personality and reign serve as lessons in leadership for future monarchs dealing with public perception and political pressures. George IV's personal writings and reflections offer insight into the vulnerabilities of royal life, shaping how future leaders approach their roles. The social upheaval during his reign and the responses to it paved the way for future reforms, highlighting a monarchy's adaptation to changing times. Even after his death, George IV remained a symbolic figure in discussions of monarchy, fame, and the balance between extravagance and duty. George IV's approach to governance illustrated the tension between tradition and change, providing lessons for both royalty and the political realm. In a broader historical context, George IV's life and reign reflect the shifting dynamics of power and public sentiment that would continue to evolve in the 19th century. At the colorful St. James's Palace, candles flickered amid hushed whispers as Queen Charlotte gazed tenderly at her newborn son, George Augustus Frederick, cradled in her arms. King George III, filled with fatherly pride, stood nearby, his robust figure illuminated by the palace's soft light as he admired his newly born son, reflecting a legacy of royal duty and responsibility. As a young boy, George IV's education under the watchful eye of tutors fostered his talents in arts and culture, setting the stage for a future filled with patronage and extravagance. Matured into a handsome young man, George IV's lifestyle of extravagant parties and fashion led to him being dubbed Prinny, which set a tone for public scrutiny of his reign. In 1785, George IV married Caroline of Brunswick. Their union, meant for political alliance, soon backfired amid disagreements and scandals that would plague their marriage. Despite their troubled relationship, George IV became a father, delighting in the joyful moments shared with his daughter, Princess Charlotte, bringing some light to his tumultuous life. Following a tumultuous reign, George IV ascended the throne in 1820, inheriting a nation fraught with political unrest and demands for reform. Under his rule, the country faced significant events, including the Peterloo Massacre in 1819, which sparked outrage and highlighted the need for political reform, challenging his governance. His nickname, Prinny, stemmed from his lavish tastes, leading to extravagant spending amidst widespread poverty, igniting public outrage against his rule. George IV's passion for the arts culminated in the grand commissioning of the Brighton Pavilion, reflecting his desire for distinct cultural expression. Despite his passion for the arts, The king's reign faced criticism for being historically out of touch, as the nation clamored for reforms to address pressing social issues. As health issues began to plague him, George IV's reliance on advisors grew, showcasing the vulnerability of royal authority amid his isolation. His complex relationship with his daughter, Princess Charlotte, showed a rare glimpse of warmth, as he publicly adored her despite his personal struggles. George IV's reign was marked by resistance to reforms, ultimately leading to conflicts that set the stage for political upheavals long after his death. The controversial legacy of his lavish lifestyle and tumultuous reign left lasting impressions on public life, influencing how monarchy would be perceived in Britain for generations. As he departed from this world on June 26, 1830, his life reflected both the vulnerabilities of royal privilege and the shifting tides of public governance. His reflections on power and isolation echoed through history, impacting future monarchs and shaping the narrative of British royalty in the throes of modernization. George IV's artistic contributions paved the way for future cultural movements in Britain, igniting a passion for the arts that grew even after his reign. Under George IV's influence, the perception of monarchy began to shift, with greater scrutiny placed on royal expenditures and the responsibilities of leadership during changing times. Ultimately, George IV's life and reign serve as a case study in the complexities of royal life, linking opulence with political sensitivity and social responsibility.